so often I think military spouses expect that all of a sudden, once they're employed, all of their problems are going to be solved. Like, oh, I'm going to have a sense of purpose and fulfillment, and I'm going to be happy and all of this stuff. And it's not just having a job, it's how you're spending your time and what you're doing. I was just really unhappy in the job that I was in. And so I typed into Google military spouse wellness, and InDependent popped up.
Welcome to More Than a Milspouse, the podcast for military spouses who want to live with more meaning and less overwhelm. I'm your host, Christine, seasoned military spouse, mom of 3, life coach, and your guide to intentionally designing a life you're excited about as a military spouse. I'm here to help you get the clarity you need so you can get unstuck and unlock your purpose and potential. Because you, my friend, are more than a milspouse. You have something valuable to offer. And when you pursue the things that light your heart on fire, you trade frustration for fulfillment and isolation for a life of impact. It's time to discover who you are meant to be, because together we can change the world. Welcome to the Summer Milspouse Transformation Series. This series is all about helping you change your life from the inside out by looking at small shifts you can make in your everyday life that can lead to some really big results. We are walking through this entire summer my favorite tool for self-discovery, for life transformation, and setting goals as a military spouse. If this is your first time joining us, I recommend that you go back and listen to episode 207, where we kick off this series. And if you haven't already, you can access this tool for free just by clicking the link in the show notes. But whether you are listening to this series in order or not, I know you are going to get a ton of value out of this episode and out of the entire series. Each week, we are focusing on one particular area of our life that is going to help us truly live a life that we're excited about, one with more meaning and less overwhelm. And that begins with a focus on taking care of ourselves. And last week, we talked specifically about the importance of rest and play. And today, we're going to build on that foundation. Today's conversation is with Evie King, the president of InDependent, an organization focused on military spouse wellness. We talk in this episode about military spouse wellness and about our mental and emotional well-being in particular. There are so many nuggets in today's conversation, so without further ado, here's my conversation with Evie King. InDependent is a wellness community built by military spouses for military spouses. Their mission is to make wellness accessible and create opportunities for all military spouses to connect for friendship, accountability, and inspiration. The organization became a 501c3 in 2018, and they are probably best known for the Independent Wellness Summit, which is hosted virtually for all military spouses. And today, I am joined by the president of InDependent and the 2023 AFI Military Spouse of the Year, Evie King, to talk about wellness for military spouses. So, Evie, welcome to the show. Would you introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about you and about your military story.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I am thrilled to be on the Milspouse Mastermind show. I've listened to episodes. I've heard you talk about it back when we met during MSOI Week in 2023. And yeah, I'm just thrilled to be here. So funnily enough, I am a child of 2 veterans who, parents served, grandparents served. So service life has been a part of who I am. But out of all of my siblings, and I'm one of 6, for whatever reason, I verbally told my mom I would never marry a service member. And out of all of my siblings, I am now the only one married to a service member and connected to the military. So
I love it. I said the exact same thing.
Yeah. The words, the story we tell about ourselves, like, why would I even say that? I don't know. Um, but I've lived. This is now our third time Oconus. So I was just talking about how amazing it is that you're in Hawaii. I'm in Germany. We're both actually PCSing Oconus or back to Conus, which is really exciting. So trying to keep lives going while still sending your stuff in advance. And like right now I'm talking to you from my now empty living room, on a picnic table and folding chair, and I feel like, yeah, that's just military spouse life. That's military life.
For sure. I remember when we PCS last time and I was sitting in my tiny little closet trying to record an episode because that was like the one place that had the least amount of echoes. And, that's just what you do as a military spouse.
Yes, you problem solve, and you don't think, hey, I can't do this for 2 months because we're in a state of transition. It's, how can I make this work? And we just make it happen.
We do. So you said, I'm never going to marry anybody in the service. And then you meet your husband. And what was that like with that realization? Like, huh,
So honestly, I tell my spouse all the time how grateful I am for this life. It has not been without its challenges. I believe in optimism wed to reality. So, I do generally tend to be pretty optimistic, but I understand that there are challenges and a lot of barriers that we have to overcome that often just sort of grind us down sometimes in the day to day. So, something really small might be the cherry on top that causes you to crumble, and it might not make sense to anyone outside of the military community, but if you tell a spouse that, they're like, I get it. I've been there where, the smallest thing was what tipped you over. Um, but I'm really grateful for this life. I've always wanted to live abroad. I knew it was something I was either going to pursue professionally in my own job. Um, and honestly, I think I would have been happy in the career that I had before I married my spouse. I worked for an amazing manufacturing company. I loved who I worked with. I had a lot of opportunity for a career progression. Personally, I was involved in theater. I had a really good community around me. Um, but where I'm at now is not anything that I probably would have dreamed of being. And it's been really wonderful. And I don't think I would ever say that I wish I was somewhere else or doing something else.
I love it. My life looks nothing like I thought it would. And yet, there are so many good things that can come out of this lifestyle and so many opportunities that I never would have experienced had my life gone according to my plan.
Absolutely, yes. And I think that that's something that for there were definitely times, so I always say that I had to pivot and persevere. There were definitely times when, especially when it came to my own personal and professional growth, that I was frustrated with some of the opportunities that were either presented to me or not presented to me. For example, I took a job when we lived in South Korea because I wanted to work. My husband had school loans. We wanted to pay them down. We wanted to travel, all the things. I wanted to contribute and have an income. But it was a job that was nowhere in line with where I had been going professionally. And then when I moved to our next duty station in North Carolina, I eventually took that job off of my resume because it was confusing so many people how I could go from, one level and almost take many, many steps back in their minds professionally and then try to achieve either the level that I was at before or even higher. And that's another reason why I advocate for people to do intentional volunteering, because it was the volunteering that I did during that time that kept my resume active. So I didn't actually have a gap in my resume, even though I took that job off. And I was still able to tell the story of my personal and professional growth in a way that made sense to people. But now, I essentially am an entrepreneur. As you said, Independent became its own 501(c)(3) in 2018. I never thought I would do anything like this. I never really said I wanted to own my own business. I wanted to be that person with a corner office working for a corporation and, helping them achieve their strategic goals. And now I'm the one sort of leading this organization and learning, sometimes painfully, along the way. And it's been a wonderful journey. And again, something that I'm really grateful for. Never would have seen myself doing. But now that I'm here, it's, yeah, it's just been something that's so wonderful. And I'm glad I had that opportunity.
I really love what you said about building your resume in a strategic way, because I think there is the fear sometimes, well, if I'm not working, what do I do with my resume? Or if I'm not working in my career field, if I'm not doing things in a way that makes sense to the person looking at the resume, what do I do? And that means that you're going to have a gap or something. And so to build it strategically in a way and to use the volunteer opportunities. So even if you don't want to put the paid employment on there, there's a way to do this in a way that's telling the story of where you ultimately want to go. So I think that's a really good tip for everyone listening. Talk about how you originally got involved with Independent.
So while I was in South Korea working, I was probably the lowest I had ever been in terms of my own well-being. I was just really unhappy. And another lesson sort of learned then, where we talk a lot about right now, military spouse employment being, I think, 21% for active duty military spouses. And so often I think military spouses expect that all of a sudden, once they're employed, all of their problems are going to be solved. Like, oh, I'm going to have a sense of purpose and fulfillment, and I'm going to be happy and all of this stuff. And it's not just having a job, it's how you're spending your time and what you're doing. I was just really unhappy in the job that I was in. And so I typed into Google military spouse wellness, and Independent popped up because they had just done their first Independent Wellness Summit. So I found Independent like a week or two after their first Independent Wellness Summit in 2015. And then we were moving to North Carolina, where one of the founders were. And I just reached out to her and I said, hey, I'm moving to the area. I would love to get involved. And then I started helping her with more local meetups, and then just gradually started taking on more and more responsibilities to now where I'm the president of the organization. And that's honestly something that I really have tried to continue to cultivate in our organization. And that is giving anybody who joins our team the opportunity to explore different skills and areas of interest, and really help them kind of learn. Maybe they've never done marketing before, but then they end up really, really loving it. They don't have any experience in it, but we're willing to teach them that. Or maybe they've never done graphic design or web development, and now they find themselves really loving it. And we've had a number of team members who have taken the experiences from Independent and translating it into getting jobs outside of the organization.
One of the things I love that you said is that having a job does not equate to having that sense of purpose and fulfillment. And so often we think, if I only had that one thing, whether it be the job, whether it be the preferred duty station, whatever it is, if I just had this one thing, then I would be happy. Then I would feel fulfilled. And having a job doesn't necessarily give you that. You can still have a job and be unhappy. And it's really having that sense of purpose and meaning in our life. And sometimes that happens through what you do to earn a living. And sometimes that happens in other ways. And so what Independent has done is twofold. One, really build and help military spouses with their wellness. And two, give them the opportunity to explore these other avenues and see, where is that sense of purpose for me.
Yeah, I talked with a military spouse once who I met through actually the Military Spouse of the Year program, and she was a lawyer. And she said, I like being a lawyer, but that's not actually where I gain my fulfillment from. She was very involved in her community, and she gained her fulfillment and purpose from her volunteer work outside of being a lawyer. She was like, being a lawyer is just where the paycheck comes in. I'm not unhappy, but yeah, I gain my sense of purpose and fulfillment and meaning from the work that I do outside of my employment. And I found that really interesting because I think especially at that time I thought that employment had to fulfill both and that there weren't multiple avenues that we can almost like piecemeal a successful and exciting and happy life. And especially for military spouses, to me it opened up so many possibilities where sometimes you might be in a situation, depending on the duty station or the season of life you're in, where you might accept or stay in a job or a role that maybe isn't bringing you that level of fulfillment that maybe you might normally pursue. But, it provides you the flexibility you need with your spouse's schedule and picking up the kids or, whatever it is, but that you can still gain that fulfillment, that purpose, that joy, and flourish in life by pursuing other things outside and your general just day to day. And it was a really wonderful and freeing way to look at our lives as a whole.
Which is exactly what we are trying to do on this podcast and specifically in this series, to be able to look at all of these areas of our life and how we go about transforming our lives. And I really want to unpack this idea of wellness in a minute. But since you brought up Military Spouse of the Year, you were named the 2023 AFI Military Spouse of the Year. What was that like for you?
Well, I mean, it was unexpected, not because I don't think that the work that I'm doing is deserving of recognition, but because when you're in that room and you're reading the profiles of all of the military spouses who are a part of that program and nominated and win their base, military spouses are amazing and they're doing so many incredible things. And in many ways, I kind of wish that like everyone could get the Military Spouse of the Year award because, yeah, it's just it. I was in awe of the people that I was part of that year group with. But it's been really wonderful because it's opened up a lot of doors, and I realize it's given me some privileges that I would not have had if not for that title. But one of the best things someone said was, okay, Evie, you have the title. What are you going to do with it? And so, for some people, they can just kind of accept it because we always say it's a title for what you have done. It's not something that, for what you are going to do. But I really wanted to use it to further what we're doing at Independent because I feel so strongly about the importance of resources and education and tools that are specific to military spouse well-being. So often military spouses kind of get lumped into like just civilian wellness resources or quote military family, which is also just children and just like, I don't know, anyone who's not the service member. But really, we have a lot of unique needs because so often we are the ones that are, not to use just like a phrase so often said, but holding down the home front for lack of a better phrase. Like we are the center often of the military home because the service member is gone or their job takes them away a lot. And especially if you have children, they're looking to the military spouse to make a lot of decisions in the home that impacts the well-being of the entire military family. And so being able to have conversations with people about the needs of military spouses and why military spouse wellness matters was a huge and wonderful honor that I know I'm just going to continue to do even after this year is over.
Was there anything in particular that you learned about the military spouse community that you didn't necessarily know or have as good of a grasp on a year ago?
Yeah, I think When it comes to EFMP, honestly, I was able to connect with some leaders in the EFMP space. There's the exceptional EFM, yeah, exceptional.
Family
Yes,
member?
it's not the program; it's the organization, and I'm blanking on the name. But Austin is this the executive director, and
Exceptional family members of the military.
thank you. Yes, 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 yes. I knew she was like, when you type in EFMP, I want our organization to pop up. And I was like, that is such a genius way to name an organization. So thank you. Um, so we ended up in a lot of the same events throughout the year and just naturally would start talking. And honestly, it really opened my eyes. We had already developed and had conversation about caregivers in the military community, but really understanding the nuance that EFMP families have to deal with in their own lives and the impact that has on often the military spouse who is taking care of so much of this was really eye opening to me. And hearing so many of them say, like, Evie, there is no time in the day. There's like literally no time in the day for me to take care of myself because all I am doing is advocating for my child if they're the ones who are the FMP. And then hearing from family members where both the military spouse and the child were in the program and advocating for both of them. Yeah, I think that honestly was one of the biggest sort of moments where I realized there's a real need there and how can we fill that and are there other resources that are trying? And if not, what can we all do, um, to help alleviate some of those burdens?
Because it's really about those conversations and those connections that allow us to work together to find the solutions, because we all have our own area that we are passionate about and we can achieve a lot of change through that. But when we come together and we can see these different perspectives and work together, those solutions become even more important and more impactful.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I want to be able to help the military spouses that are spending so much of their time and energy working the EFMP system because it's just so slow and tedious. Like, and sort of alleviate some of that stress that they're having so that yeah, they're able to pour into their families at a level that they feel like they're not just completely giving all of themselves up to the point where they forget who they are or don't even have time to think about their own needs. Um, and that's where the whole community sort of coming together and going like independent focuses on military spouse wellness. That's something that very much so aligns with our mission because I also believe like, there is such thing as mission creep out there. We don't need to solve every single problem just because it's the new hot problem that the DoD is like, ooh, we need to talk about this. It's been employment for a while, but now it's quality of life. And while employment is a part of that, it's kind of the whole package. It's like looking at military life holistically. And for us at Independent, we look at wellness holistically. And I think that there's a lot of opportunities there for us to support different groups within the military spouse community that can sometimes be overlooked.
Yeah, so let's dig into this concept of wellness for military spouses and maybe just start broad strokes. And what do we mean when we say wellness for military spouses and why does it matter?
Yeah, so when we say we've had to define this to make sure that like we were had a clear like focus on what we were doing. When we say wellness, we mean whole person wellness. And I say holistic, but some people kind of get different ideas about that. But we talk about it in terms of mind, which is broken up into two branches. So mind is creative wellness and mental health, body, which has physical well being as well as nutrition, community, which is your social wellness and your environmental wellness, which is an important part of military life because often we do not have control of our surroundings, whether that's our home, our community base, whatever. And then purpose. And within purpose is financial well being and personal growth. So that is what we at InDependent talk about. And sometimes we'll talk about one specific, sometimes we talk about it holistically because wellness in and of itself is not unique to the military spouse community, but our wellness is rooted in military life and the experiences that we have as a result of it. And so, that is what makes our approach to wellness different and our needs different is military life. Um, yeah, so that I think is our sort of definition of wellness and our approach to wellness. Why military spouse wellness matters is again because military life makes our needs unique. Um, with like you and I experience stress, the civilian community experiences stress. That is not unique to, again, our experience. But what is unique is what access do we have? The transitions between moving where, you're not, maybe you're between doctors. Um, the whether or not your service member is there, or what is their deployment cycle, right? You have some units where they're deploying all the time. Every 3 months, they're gone for 3 months. And then you have others where it's once every couple of years, they're gone for 9 months or something like that. And so you have all of these different components that make up military life that make it where the resources, again, that the civilian community have don't always necessarily fit with that. But then also what is being talked about, even on the military side, doesn't necessarily always meet the specific needs of military spouses. And so, again, at InDependent, we look through everything from the lens of how does this impact the military spouse experience? How does this help a military spouse make healthy decisions for themselves and or their families? Because again, we call the military spouse the heart of the home. And when you take care of the heart of the home, you're taking care of the entire military community.
For sure. And when we don't take care of the heart of the home, then we struggle and everyone around us starts to struggle. And it's interesting. I was talking to a friend last week and we were talking about the unique challenge of military life and that you find these practices that work for you in a given location and then you PCS. And that doesn't mean that all the same resources are available to you. And there's this process of learning, okay, what can I do in this duty station? What resources are available to me now? And that transition and building that support system just takes time that you probably wouldn't have to deal with if you are living in one place or, you are rooted in one area of the country.
Right, exactly. I mean, we've talked about it even from the level of the weather, because, like, to you and I, maybe initially you're not thinking like the weather has the impact to impact, has the ability to impact your well being, but you're living in Hawaii. I'm living in Germany. We literally had rain from October to the end of March. My energy level, my emotional and like well-being was so impacted by that. The people around me just moved differently. And that's just weather. And, that's maybe not something that people talk about generally when it comes to well being, but that's something that is very important in the military spouse community when we're moving from. I mean, we had friends who moved from Hawaii to Germany, and they said it was they were so grateful for the opportunity to travel and do a lot of stuff, but that doesn't mean that the almost shock to the system from the different weather patterns and the impact that it had on how they felt on a day-to-day basis wasn't real.
Yeah, it's going to be a transition for sure because I got to this place last time I was stateside where I became vitamin D deficient and I had to take extra doses of vitamin D to make up for that. And now I've spent 4 years living on islands and we are moving back to the mainland. And I'm like, okay, like I need to be aware of this because my body craves the sunshine. And I've got to find those practices that are going to help me when I'm not in a place where I can be outside in the sunshine year round.
Right. And I mean, it's even like access to what food is around you. Maybe I know things are very expensive in Hawaii, but maybe you've had more access to like fresh fruits and vegetables and all of that. And honestly, here in Germany, their idea of a balanced meal is potatoes and meat. Like that is where are the veggies is a question that I ask my spouse quite frequently when we go out to eat. I'm like, where are the veggies? Um, and I even experienced that when we moved from Virginia to South Korea, or even Virginia, North Carolina to Kansas. Like these moves, the transitions that surround them, like you said, it's acclimating to a new area, new resources, new weather patterns, new communities around you, new schedules, new, what you did in one location, you might not be able to do in another location in the same way. And so you're having to adapt. And that's why I say you're having to like pivot and persevere, because sometimes, like, I persevered this winter. I would not say I was thriving this winter. It was extremely tough. It was extremely challenging. And I had to redefine for me how I defined a successful day. And I had to be realistic with what I could accomplish because my energy levels were so impacted, even though I was taking vitamin D and all of that and doing all the recommended things. And so I think again it is those, they seem kind of small when you're talking about it, but it affects our everyday. And it's our everyday that sometimes when you're those things sort of again just like pile up and pile up. And if we're not taking care of ourselves, if we're not trying to figure out ways to be well in those circumstances, those little everyday, sometimes challenges or barriers that we have to overcome can really pile up and feel like a lot. And me explaining that to somebody who does not understand the military experience could potentially take upwards of 6 to 7 sessions with a mental health professional before they even understand enough to be able to give you the advice that you would actually start being able to put into practice.
It's interesting because I've heard this from a lot of people. Like I went to talk to somebody about this and they could not understand why my life was like this, like why I'm having struggles in these areas. And having someone that truly understands what this lifestyle is actually like and what it takes to be able to thrive in the midst of all of this is so important. So talk to us about some of those practices, because sometimes we think that in order to take care of ourselves, we need to have all this extra time or have access to certain resources. But what are some of those little things that we can do to build our wellness?
Honestly, I think one of the biggest things that we could all probably work on is our sleep. If you were, to me, if I was to pick one area to kind of hone in on and try to, for lack of a better word, optimize, I think it would be sleep. More and more studies are just coming out and showing the impact that poor sleep has on just so many areas of our wellness, our ability to handle stress, our ability to, make those choices in the morning between like a pastry that's full of sugar and maybe a healthier food option. Can actually be impacted by the number of hours of sleep you had the night before. So, as silly as that sounds, if I was to encourage you to work on one area, it would be like, how can you get quality sleep? Um, and we talk about that from, this idea of like, your bed should not be a place, for example, that you're doing work on. Like mentally, you're looking at your bed as a place for rest and sleep and respite. Um, I struggle with this because I'm a clean person, but I'm not necessarily like the tidiest person. I tell my husband all the time, like, I'm like the blob, I'll take up as much space as you give me. So my bedside table, I go through phases where it's like very nice and clean and tidy, and then it's just like utter chaos. But those moments when it is not cluttered, when my bedroom is not cluttered, like I moved my dresser from being physically visibly in front of me to the closet so that I couldn't see the clutter that was on the dresser. Those little things, they really, really helped me. I made like my bedroom is a place. It's a space that I go and I feel calm. And it took me a while to kind of figure out what that meant and how what I put in there and how it impacted me. But it's just small changes. It's, making your bed every day. Like those small things, they do matter. And it might not be something that you can put your finger on and go, oh, since I started making my bed, I'm feeling a lot better. But those kind of like small habits. Um, yeah, the other thing that I think I would encourage military spouses to do is, if you are an already established member of a community, when someone new comes in, rather than putting the burden of inserting themselves into the community onto the new person, encouraging those who already have that established community to welcome them in, and yeah, I just think that like so often I've read so many articles that say like, oh, if you're the new person, this is how you make friends. And I've always thought to myself, like, by that point you're exhausted, you've just PCS'd, we know what that means, right? And how amazing would it be if someone in your new community was like, hey, let's meet for coffee, rather than you asking them, let's meet for coffee, and taking that one thing off your plate. Or, hey, I want to invite you to this coffee or this group. And often those don't tend to be the people that I become friends with, like initially, but it breaks that ice and it starts getting you to like insert yourself into the community again, because I think that that first time being social is often the hardest. And so while that's not necessarily a practice for the, maybe every individual, I do think it is a way that the community can help, like, our well-being, especially in those moments of transition.
Yeah, it's just a little thing, and it doesn't seem like a lot, but it is those little things. Like you said, the little habits, the willingness to do small changes in our lives that can sometimes make the biggest difference. Because we know that science says, like, hey, when you are going through a big transition, that's a lot on your nervous system, right? And so we tend to shrink in a little bit. We tend to go to what we know, what feels familiar. And so when you are the new person trying to put yourself out there, put yourself into the uncomfortable situations where everybody else seems to know each other and you don't know anyone, right? That's a lot more stress on your nervous system. But when we are somewhere where we are already established, that we can take that first step, that makes that transition a little easier for someone else. And so, it doesn't have to be something that takes over your life. It's just those small daily actions that can make a big difference, not only for yourself, but for everyone around you.
Yeah, absolutely. It's those small things. I could probably do a whole podcast episode on digital well-being, which I think is another area that could be very helpful for military spouses because so much of our lives and our connection to others is through technology. But yeah, that's a lot.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot that we could talk about. I do want to talk a little bit about our mental well-being because there's this whole spectrum of what we mean when we talk about our mental well-being. So could you just kind of touch on that and what we can do to build our mental and emotional health?
Well, I mean, for for military spouses, I think it just kind of depends on where you are at. For some, we do need that professional help. That can come in the form of meeting with an actual, psychiatrist, psychologist, licensed, clinical practitioner, whatever that happens to be. I actually met with a coach, so a wellness coach. I didn't need that level of support, and it was much more accessible as well because, as we all know, no surprise, there's a huge need and lack of practitioners in the mental health space right now. And I found that through someone who had some credentials with wellness coaching, and she was able to give me some frameworks to view like why I had these behaviors that I just kept doing over and over and over again that were just not serving me. And I realized like it was because I thought that's just what I had to do. And again, it goes back to like wellness is such a personal experience. Like what works for you might not work for somebody else. And that's another reason I think, especially at InDependent, we try so hard to get the perspectives from multiple different angles so that no military spouse ever feels like when they learn something or think of something, they're like, well, I can't do that, so as a result, I'm just sort of stuck. And so I think that the way that we can invest in our mental and emotional well-being just sort of depends on taking that self-assessment initially and like what level of help do I need, because again, so much of it has to do with isolation and that lack of connection and needing to build that community. So maybe it is that you just need to be surrounded by people that you jive with, um, and finding the group of military spouses that align with where you're wanting to go professionally or personally, or wherever it is that you are in life. So it's not that everyone needs to get that like professional wellness expert, having to make an appointment, go through TRICARE level of help, but then some do. And I think it's just realizing what it is that you need and then making that a priority. Um, we, especially military spouses, we're so used to putting the needs of others before our own. And I think so many people would be surprised at how well they're able to continue to serve those around them and the ones that they love when they are taking care of themselves rather than taking care of themselves last.
I think that's such an important point to make because it's easy to say, I will take care of everyone around me and then I will focus on myself because it feels selfish in the moment to prioritize taking care of myself. But if we're not taking care of ourselves, then we're not ultimately able to take care of those around us. And so we have to establish these practices in our life that are going to allow us to take care of everyone around us. And the practices that work for me aren't necessarily the practices that work for you. all of us are different, but it's really about sitting down and looking at ourselves and saying, okay, what is it that I need? What is it that I can do? Not necessarily something big, but just something little that I can do that helps me move toward a healthier version of myself. And sitting down, taking that time to think about it, and then trying some things, because sometimes you try it and I'm like, okay, that did not work. I'm going to try something else. But we eventually start to move the needle when we do these small things that can make a big impact in the long run and allow us to show up for ourselves and for everyone around us.
Yeah, a really easy exercise to do is actually to think of like back when you were younger, what is something that you did that brought you a lot of joy? Like, what is maybe an activity that you really enjoyed or a place that you liked going to? And see if you can recreate that in some capacity. Like you said, it might not work, but at least you're trying something different. And I would even say that when you're looking for mental health professionals or coaches or anything like that, the same goes. You kind of have to shop around. I've heard some people who finally get to that point, and yes, it can be frustrating. They finally get to that point where they like make the appointment, and then they have the first session, and they're like, "Oh, that didn't. I did not like that." And then they just don't come back or don't find someone different, and it's like that's not how this works. You just need to keep trying, and whether it's finding the right doctor or coach, um, or it's finding the right activity or even group that you want to surround yourself with. So just keep trying and testing things out and realize that it's a journey.
Yeah, I think that's so important because it's easy to feel like I tried this, it didn't work, that I need to give up. And sometimes, it means we need to shift to pivot to something else. And sometimes it just means we need to try a different person or a different thing and just to put ourselves out there again, to know that just because I tried this one person and we did not jive doesn't mean that this is not going to be beneficial to my life. So sometimes we just need to try again. So I think that's a really good word for us. As we wrap up today, can you just share a little bit about the resources that InDependent offers for military spouses?
Yep. So currently, everything that we offer is virtual. You can access it through our website, in-dependent.org. A really easy way to find us is just type in military spouse wellness, and we'll most likely pop up. Our annual Independent Wellness Summit, which is, we call it a week of wellness from the comfort of your home or anywhere in the world, is every March. So we'll be opening up registration in the early new year. Pretty much everything that we do is free. There might be like a paid upgraded version, but part of making wellness accessible is ensuring that the resources can be accessed not only anywhere in the world, but that cost is not a barrier. Um, we're very excited to be launching our very first course this year. It's going to be called Feel the Home Front, and it is a course that teaches military families how to shop for nutritious foods while still maintaining a budget, and an environment of wellness in their home. Um, so we're very excited for that. It's going to be launching very soon. It will also be free. And that's just going to be the start of some of the courses that we do. And then, yeah, we put out articles, we put out information and encouragement on our social media. And again, it really is just all from the perspective of military spouse well-being. So we try to make it relevant to the experiences that we have in the community that we serve.
I love it. And you guys are going to get a sneak peek next week because Heather Campbell will be my guest on the show. And she's going to be talking about eating healthy on a budget. So come back next week to hear that episode and then get excited about the full course that is launching. Evie, thank you so much for taking time out of your crazy schedule to come talk with us. I know this is going to be so impactful to people. Good luck with your PCS, and I can't wait to connect with you again soon.
Wonderful. Thank you for having me. It's been a lot of fun, and I hope someone who's listening to this is able to take something away from it that resonates with what they need in their lives right now.
All right, guys, I hope you loved that episode as much as I did. It is so fun just to see us showing up as military spouses and really talking about what it means to live with intention and to take care of ourselves in the midst of all the craziness of military life. And you got to see that by us having this conversation as both of us are preparing to PCS and trying to record when things are not always as smooth as we would like them to be. If there's echoes in the room, all of the things that are just a part of this lifestyle. I truly hope that you will take these ideas, these pieces, to put them into practice, to think about your quality of sleep, to think about how you can help welcome somebody who's new to your installation, to think about how you can improve your health and well-being, and specifically boost your mental and emotional well-being. Sometimes we need a little more targeted support. We need to talk to a mental health professional. Sometimes we just need to add some practices like journaling or mindfulness. And sometimes we need someone to help us, to give us a framework, to work with a coach that understands the military lifestyle. If that is you, my coaching offers are on hiatus as I am PCSing. But if you would like to get on the wait list, just go to the Work With Me page on the website or click the link in the show notes, and I will send you information as soon as I am able to start meeting with people again. Because I would love to support you in your journey and to help you step into who you are becoming as a military spouse. I cannot wait to share next week's conversation where we talk about our physical health and well-being, and particularly our nutrition and how we do that in the midst of the craziness of military life, how we do that in the midst of a PCS or a deployment or any of these life stressors that make us want to revert to comfort foods and what's the easiest thing to put on our plate. Heather Campbell has some really great tips for us, so that will be next week. Until then, may you live filled, fueled, and full of joy. Hey, amazing Milspouse, before you go, I want you to know that I love hearing from you. The More Than a Milspouse community exists to help you thrive as a military spouse. Figure out what lights your heart on fire and empower you to live with purpose and impact. You can have an incredible impact simply by heading over to iTunes to subscribe and leave a review. But your impact doesn't stop there. You can empower those around you simply by sharing an episode with a friend or neighbor, someone who needs a little encouragement in this military life. And if this episode was meaningful to you, spread the love by taking a screenshot of this episode and tagging me on Instagram so we can continue to reach more people, change more lives, and shift the way that military spouses look at life. Because we are better together, and together we can change the world. Let's do it.